This is the second video in the Peaceful Preparedness series. Today I am going to focus on food. In this video, I'm going to go over a lot of information. So if you want to pause right now and grab yourself a pencil and a notepad, that might be helpful. Stay to the end because I'm going to definitely tell you what I absolutely would not spend money on getting by way of long-term food storage, and I'll tell you why. Please subscribe as I will continue this series of trying to help you be peaceful in your preparedness, try to break it down and make it less confusing, and maybe get you on your way to preparedness. I'm going to follow the TREE acronym. T for targeted, R for rational, the first E is efficient, and the second E is enduring. The general rule of thumb is the 3 B's: beans, pew-pews that start with a B, and band-aids, which is an overall encompassing of food, protection, and medication. And in food is of course included water. So when we're talking about food and water as preps, there's a few things to consider. Number 1, the dietary needs of your family. Number 2, how you're going to store those things. Number 3, do you eat those things? And number 4, what we often overlook is food fatigue. Food fatigue is a real thing. It is when you eat so much of the same thing that you lose your appetite for it, therefore not being able to take in the appropriate nutrients to give you the amount of strength you need to go on. So a lot of times people literally do stock up on a lot of things that they've been told to: rice, beans, canned meats, and a lot of the emergency prepared food buckets. But one thing that can help you stave off food fatigue is when you have your preps, you want to make sure that you are prepping spices and cookbooks for the types of things that you have stockpiled. There are several cookbooks out there on Amazon for Pantry foods, or cookbooks that use canned foods. So you would like to get at least one of those cookbooks that'll give you some inspiration and ideas on how to make the food that you have stockpiled and to diversify it and make it palatable over a long term so that you don't get fatigued with eating the same thing over and over. I am not a proponent of the emergency food bucket stockpiling. No, because a lot of times those food buckets are filled with empty calories. If you were to open up the bucket and actually made all of those 50, 80, 100 meals, you will find that a lot of it is sugar and just empty calories. And a lot of it is just not edible. It's not palatable. Yes, in a situation where you said, well, at the end of the world, I would be starving. I would eat whatever I had. True. But how healthy are you going to be with a bunch of sugar, sodium-laden food? A lot of these companies, quiet is kept, they're banking on the fact that the world is not going to end and that you will never open up that bucket of food and you will never taste it. So by the time you do open it up and taste it, it's the end of the world. So if it's terrible or inedible or it didn't live up to what you thought it would, there's no recourse for that company. Granted, you can buy those buckets and try them out and taste them and see. I don't think I need to sample them to know that that is not something that I want to depend on to feed my family. So what is my solution? Well, my solution is yes, long-term food storage, but long-term food storage that you have created. Things that you have dehydrated, or if you are in the position to buy a freeze dryer, things that you have freeze dried, frozen dried, I don't know. But things that you have home canned, things that you have put in mylar bags, and then those bags inside of 5-gallon buckets with lids, with oxygen absorbers, things of that nature. So I'm gonna go through, it is so much, guys. It's so much with prepping for food that you can fall down a rabbit hole and just not be able to get out. So what I'm gonna try to do is I'm gonna go through the tree of food preparedness and try to give you some, not all, because once you start researching, you'll find more things. But these are some of the things that I would start with for food preparedness. So back to the tree of food preparedness. The first T in tree is targeted. And when it comes to food, you want to choose foods that your family eats. You want to choose foods that is good for your body. A lot of people have trouble with sodium and their blood sugar levels. So the foods that you choose need to not be as refined, like the white sugars or the white pastas, but those actually do store longer. I know white rice stores longer than brown rice. But that does not mean that you should not buy brown rice or brown pasta as a part of your stockpile. The second letter in the tree is rational. So decide what is the best method to preserve it long term. This needs to be a rational choice. Do you want to freeze dry? If you freeze dry it, it will be preserved in its purest nutritional form. So it will have the complete level of nutrition that it had when you freeze dried it. Dehydration deteriorates that a little bit, but it still preserves nutrition. As far as like vegetables are concerned, I think pressure canning is probably the most reductive of nutritional value when you're pressure canning, depending on what you're pressure canning. So it has to be rational, your form of food preservation. Freezing is the absolute best, in my opinion, as far as what's closest to freshness. However, when you're talking long-term food storage, I don't include anything with frozen food. My frozen food is a part of my working pantry, figuratively speaking. And when I'm thinking of long-term food storage, I don't consider my frozen food as a part of that, because in a situation where there's inclement weather, where there's a hurricane and there's no electricity, you cannot depend on what's in your freezer. Okay? The first E in food preparedness is efficiency. You want it to be efficient and you don't want to waste. You want it to be easiest to do. So what I do when I'm stockpiling for my food preps is I shop sales. So I'll give you an example. I will shop, I'll give you an example. A couple years ago, Walmart put turkeys on sale. And the frozen ones were on sale, but the refrigerated ones were really on sale. I can't even remember how much it was. Maybe 99 cents a pound, I don't know, but I bought 7 of them. I did. I bought 7 of those turkeys. And I brought them home and I put them in a slow cooker. And I cooked them down. I separated the wings. And the rest I put in slow cookers. I had like 3 or 4 slow cookers going. Then I took the meat from having cooked overnight in slow cookers and I jarred it up. and I put a little bit of liquid from the pot, and I pressure canned that meat. Then I took the I strained the broth and I canned the broth. I also made soup with some of the broth. So I got a lot of food storage out of that cell turkey. And that meat stays, if properly canned, following the I follow the Ball Blue Book recommendations, and you can also follow the Food Preservation Organization for the United States. I'm going to put a link for that website in the description notes. So that's an example of efficiency. I bought a bunch of turkeys, and from that turkey I made turkey wings for dinner. I made a lot of turkey meat that was canned that can be used later in recipes. I made turkey broth, and I made turkey soup. The final E in the tree of food preparedness is enduring, and that means long-term. So long-term food items. There are certain food items that are more long-term than others. Like I said, this is a vast subject. So I'm just going to touch on just a few of the forms of the better long-term of certain foods. So I'll start with flour. Flour is important because storing bread long term is not a choice. You can't store bread long term. But if you store the ingredients for bread, you can do that to make bread in the future. So, of course, you can store flour. You can store them in mason jars. You can store it in mylar bags with oxygen absorbers in a 5-gallon bucket with a lid. You can do that. Or you can buy wheat berries and then get you a food grinder and grind the flour from the wheat berries. The wheat berries have the long-term food storage. If I'm not mistaken, the red wheat berries last longer than the other ones. I don't want to call them white. I can't remember. But the red wheat berries allegedly store longer. You can get those in the emergency food buckets. I will buy that. Now I'll buy wheat berries in one of those emergency food buckets because I know what it is, what's in the bucket. Oils, fats. Oils can go rancid. They don't store long term, like olive oil, vegetable oil. Those things don't store long term well. If you're thinking long term storage for fats, you need to go with Crisco, coconut oil, or ghee. Ghee you can make yourself. If you buy a jar of ghee at the store, you're talking maybe $8 to $10 for a pint jar. Before the Big C, it was like $6. So I know it's crazy now. But there's a way that you can, if you get unsalted butter, some people do salted, there's a process of cooking that butter down until you cook off you actually cook off the milk part of it. And it actually becomes clear and clarified, and you jar that, and that can last for years. So ghee is definitely a way that you can store fats. Coconut oil is another one, and Crisco. And I know nobody wants to be dealing with the Crisco because of the saturated fats, but as far as storing long term, Crisco is a long term form of fats for a way of cooking. Protein is a big deal with food preparation, particularly for long-term food storage. If you don't have protein, your brain literally won't work. Like, that's the reason why they have free lunches at schools, because if kids come to school hungry, they really can't think if they haven't had the food they need, particularly protein. So protein is very important in your food storage, especially if you are a vegan or a vegetarian. You're going to have to be very creative with your storage of proteins. And of course you say, well, beans, yes, beans, but you need to make sure you store a variety of beans, and you also store the needed spices to make the different kinds of dishes so that you don't get food fatigue. So here's a list of long-term, and I'm looking at my notes, long-term food storage for protein. Dry beans, of course, lentils, canned beans, home canned beans, dehydrated ground beef, chickens for eggs. If you raise chickens, you will have eggs. Okay, it's not unlimited because chicken's egg production decreases over time. So in order for it to be a long-term thing, you need to have a rooster. I don't have a rooster yet. I am going to get one, but you need to have a rooster in order to reproduce chickens so that you will constantly have eggs, because over years the egg production will decrease. So as far as long term, you need a rooster and eggs will provide great protein sources. You can dehydrate eggs into a powder. You can buy dehydrated eggs. You can buy, I bought number 10 cans from Augustin Farms. But now that I have chickens, I'm going to start dehydrating my own powdered eggs for long-term food storage. I think that's a lot cheaper. Dehydrated ground beef. I eat a lot of beef sauces like lasagna, spaghetti, chili, tacos. I have found for me that my best form of storing ground beef is dehydrating it. So you buy the leanest form of beef. If you can't, don't worry about it, because there's a step in there that's going to help you out. So you fry it up in the pan and you let the oil, you take the oil out of it, you put it in a strainer, you turn on hot water and you douse the meat with hot water until you get as much of the fat off as you can. And you put it in a line dehydrating tray and you dehydrate it. And once it's completely dried, it's like crumbles. You put them in a mason jar and it's shelf stable. And when it's time to dehydrate it, you rehydrate it. I usually take a cup of the crumbles and a couple of cups, maybe 3 cups of boiling water, and I put it in the water, and then I just add the tomato paste in order to make the spaghetti sauce, or tomato paste and the chili powder for chili. So there's I like for ground beef. I do not like canned ground beef. It's disgusting to me. So dehydrated ground beef is my form of how I would long-term store proteins. I think the best way for shelf-stable vegetables is dehydration. And the quickest, easy way is to buy frozen vegetables, because they've already been blanched, that you can take directly out of a frozen bag and put directly onto your dehydrated tray and into your freeze dryer if you have a freeze dryer, because the food has to be frozen before it's dried. So you can buy frozen vegetables and dehydrate those and put those in jars, and they are shelf stable. And they easily rehydrate in soups, and you just throw them in soups. And I just think that's the best thing, especially if you have a garden. Dehydrate that zucchini, dehydrate those tomatoes, dehydrate those carrots, dehydrate that celery, dehydrate those peppers. All of that stuff can be reconstituted in soups, and you get a lot of it, because when you dehydrate, it shrinks. Freeze-dried food doesn't shrink. It keeps its normal shape. But if you dehydrate it, it's going to be less. You can get more food in jars. Now, dehydrated food lasts about 10 years if done correctly. Freeze dried lasts like 25 years. Okay, so in the scale of life, if you hit an emergency, you're probably going to eat the stuff up before 10 years. I have a working pantry. I believe in rotating through my food. So the 25-year stuff, maybe I'm not a real prepper. Maybe I'm not down for that life. But it just has to be rational to me. And to me, just having food that you don't eat that's going to sit for 25 years, that's not rational, because you cannot guarantee that you're going to use it, and you're not going to guarantee that it's going to be any good. You can't guarantee it. So I believe in a working pantry that I keep stocked and rotate through. Okay. And finally, it's going to be water. Next to finally, what would I buy in a number 10 can? What would I buy in the emergency buckets? I already said one thing, wheat berries. I would definitely buy in a number in the big emergency buckets. But for the number 10 cans, things I would buy, powdered milk. I would buy beef chunks, like the beef chunks and the chicken shreds. I will buy that, and whole eggs. Those are things I will buy in number 10 cans. What I would not buy in number 10 cans are freeze-dried veggies and beef, because like I said, dehydrated ground beef is my preferred form of long-term storage of beef, and you can dehydrate veggies very easily in some of the most cheapest dehydrators. So that's definitely what I would do. So as far as water, there's certain things you can buy the big things, like the office cooler water bottles. They even have tops you can buy to put on them. You can store those in a cool, dark place, and it's an easy way to get a lot of water. You can do rain catchment barrels if that's allowed in your county, and then you can put a mesh over the top to keep things from getting in there. There are certain things that you can do to purify. Boiling is a way to purify. You can get the smart straw. There's the Berkey system, and then there's some knockoffs of the Berkey filters. There's a way you can buy the filters and make a filtering system with 5-gallon buckets. There's a lot of things on there, but water is a big deal. You have to make sure you have water for cooking and for personal hygiene. And so guys, I hope that wasn't too much. It's a lot of information. It can be overwhelming, but what I want to help people do is not to be stressed. I want you not to have analysis paralysis, and just don't start because you're overwhelmed with starting. Like I said, be targeted, be rational, be efficient, and choose things that will be enduring. And if you can do that, you are on your road to peaceful preparedness. Thank you so much for watching.